This is the Sukma-Bijapur forest belt in the Indian state of Chhattisgarh. Forests cover nearly 40% of the region and provide habitat for a vast array of plants and animals, including tigers and panthers. They are home to a large tribal population, but the thick forest cover also gives shelter to hundreds of naxalites. And every now and then, the forests reverberate with the sound of bullets. In an attempt to squash the Naxal movement in the area, separate joint teams of Indian security forces launched an anti-Naxal operation from Bijapur and Sukma districts in the Bastar region's forests, but they were trapped by the Maoists. The 3rd of April 2021. A fierce gunfight broke out between security forces and Naxalites. It lasted almost 4 hours. 22 security personnel lost their lives. Over 25 Maoists were killed in the attack. The ambush was carried out by about 400 Maoists, who surrounded the soldiers from 3 sides in an area devoid of vegetation. So far, this is the deadliest attack of the year. It comes after the March 23rd incident when 5 security personnel were killed as the Maoists blew up a bus carrying them with an improvised explosive device in the Narayanpur district of the same state. When it comes to Naxal terror attacks, Chhattisgarh remains the most vulnerable state. On the 21st of March last year, 17 security personnel were killed in a Naxal ambush in the Minpa area of Sukma district. Indian ruling party's minister Bhima Mandavi and 4 security personnel were killed after Naxals blew up their vehicle with an IED in Dantewada district on April 9, 2020. In April 2017, 25 CRPF personnel were killed in a Naxal ambush in Burkapal area of Sukma district. That same year, a month before the April incident, 12 CRPF Jawans were killed in a Maoist attack in Sukma district. In November 2016, 2 CRPF Jawans were injured in a pressure bomb blast triggered by Naxals in the dense forest of Sukma. And on April 6, 2010, 76 CRPF Jawans were killed in an ambush by Naxals near Chintalnar village in Dantewada. It was the deadliest attack by Naxals on Indian soil. Over the decades, many states have managed to tackle the Maoist problem, but as far as the recent attacks reveal, it continues to be a persistent internal security challenge. Chhattisgarh lies in the midst of the so-called Red Corridor. It's a swath of districts affected by what the government calls left-wing extremism. While the states of Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Odisha and Bihar are most affected by considerable Naxalite Maoist insurgency, the Red Corridor also includes the states of West Bengal, Maharashtra, Telangana and Andhra Pradesh. Uttar Pradesh and Madhya Pradesh are also affected. It is no coincidence that left-wing extremist outfits operate in remote, underdeveloped and poorly connected pockets of the country. Many of these affected regions are amongst the poorest in the country, with poor literacy rates. In fact, the Dantewada district has the lowest literacy rate in the nation. The Maoists, also known as Naxals, have waged an armed insurgency against the government for decades. They claim to be fighting on behalf of the poorest, who have not benefited from a long economic boom in Asia's 3rd largest economy. But the reality is different. To understand the genesis of the Naxal movement, one needs to locate it within the framework of the communist movement in India. The origin of the Maoist movement can be traced to the Telangana uprising, an armed peasant uprising that lasted from 1946 to 1951. However, the birth of Naxalism is pinpointed to the Naxalbari uprising, spring of 1967. An uprising was triggered in Naxalbari as police opened fire on a group of poor peasants while they demanded their right to crops on a particular piece of land. The peasant revolt against landowners was instigated by communist leaders. It was led by Charu Mazumdar, Kanu Sanyal and Jangal Santal. Charu Mazumdar is considered the ideologue of the Naxal movement. The leaders of the Naxalbari uprising broke away from the CPI Marxists in 1969 to form the CPI Marxist-Leninists. This party advocated armed revolution and denounced participation in the electoral process. The Naxalbari uprising inspired the Naxalite movement that expanded from West Bengal to other states of India. The current phase of Maoist rebellion began in 2004, when the People's War Group merged with the Maoist Communist Center to form the Communist Party of India, or CPI-M. The group was banned in India in 2009. Their strategy is based on the Chinese revolutionary leader Mao Zedong, and they aim to capture the state power through people's war. Charu Mazumdar once infamously said, "China's chairman is our chairman, and China's path is our path." The Chinese Communist Party was founded on the ideological foundation of Maoism in 1921. Maoism is a type of Marxism-Leninism that Mao Zedong developed. His ideology still remains influential in many pockets of the world, including India. For more than 5 decades, these militants have been paralyzing these regions by persistent attacks in the name of demanding more jobs, land, and wealth from natural resources for the country's poor indigenous communities. In 2009, the Indian government declared the CPI as a designated terrorist organization under the Unlawful Activities Act. In 2010, the then Prime Minister Manmohan Singh said that the Maoists posed the biggest internal threat to India's security. Yet again, the April 3rd attack proves the Naxal attack narrative has not changed. The state of Chhattisgarh remains a Naxal hotbed. More than half a century after it began, Maoism is alive and kicking. Rooting out Naxalism has posed to be challenging. Naxalism is an internal conflict. It is not an external war with foreign powers, and cracking down on your own people is not easy. The Ministry of Home Affairs, India, has said the Maoist rebellion is dealt with primarily by capacity building of the state governments, both in areas of security and development. Policing and maintaining law and order are matters devolved to states. So far, India's military has not participated in a direct confrontation with the Naxalites. In 2009, the Indian government for the first time said that the Maoists are getting arms from China. The same year, a senior veteran Maoist leader, Srinivasan, clearly spoke of the linkage of the Maoists in India with China. During the same period, former Foreign Minister of Nepal, Sujata Koirala, stated that the Maoists in India were receiving arms and aid from China through the Maoists in Nepal. In 2011, the special cell of Delhi police learned that a top guerrilla is operating an arms syndicate from China. Officials claim that Inter-Services Intelligence of Pakistan was funding People's Liberation Army for supplying arms and ammunition to Maoists in India, and a strategic united front was being made to carry out attacks in the country and on security forces in the Naxal-affected areas. An official source in 2011 said ISI and PLA are in touch and supplying Maoists with arms. They are supposedly using China as the alternative route. The Naxal issue is complex and rooted in local factors. Civilians too are bearing the brunt of Naxalism. According to a 2017 report by the Home Ministry of India, as many as 12,000 people have lost their lives in Maoist violence over the last 2 decades. Of these, 2,700 were security personnel, while 9,300 civilians have been killed by the Naxals. Villagers claim they are caught in the crossfire, both literally and figuratively, between the Maoists and security forces. Seeking protection from one side leaves them at risk of attack by the other. While the police has been criticized for cracking down on sympathizers of Naxal groups, Naxalites brutally attack anyone suspected of betraying them. In 2005, the infamous Salwa Judum began as a government-supported people's resistance movement from the districts of Bastar and Dantewada in Chhattisgarh. Translated as Purification Hunt in Gondi, it took the shape of a state-sponsored civil militia, and there was massive bloodshed for months on end. It was disbanded in 2011, a failed experiment. So, how should we tackle the menace of left-wing extremism? In 2015, the central government launched the National Policy and Action Plan, comprising security, development, and ensuring rights and entitlements of the local communities. Under this plan, 307 fortified police stations were constructed in Naxal-hit areas. 1,391 kilometers of roads were constructed in some of the most difficult areas, and thousands of kilometers of road construction were sanctioned. More mobile towers were installed for improving telephone connectivity in remote areas, and over 300 new banks were opened. The government also launched Operation Prahar, a codename used by police and other security forces to deal with the armed challenge posed by the Naxal insurgents. The operation crippled the Naxal insurgency to a large extent. But during the coronavirus pandemic, the CPI Maoist organized itself by recruiting youths who lost their livelihoods during the coronavirus lockdown. They were quick to induct many locals in their People's Liberation Guerrilla Army, the armed wing of the Communist Party of India. It was under this Operation Prahar that Indian security forces were ambushed by Naxal insurgents in the April 3rd attack.
जवानों ने अपना खून जो देश के लिए बहाया है वो व्यर्थ नहीं जाएगा। हमारी लड़ाई और मजबूती के साथ और मक्कमता के साथ और तीव्रता के साथ इन नक्सलियों के खिलाफ चालू रहेगी और हम इसको परिणाम तक ले जाएंगे।
The Naxalites, who managed to run away after a fierce battle, looted weapons, ammunition, uniforms and shoes from the security forces who were killed. The attack comes as the CPI Maoist observes the 20th year of the formation of the People's Liberation Guerrilla Army. While women have been integral to the Naxalite Maoist movement in India, it is now also recruiting children. In 2017, the United Nations, in its annual report, said it received information about children being recruited by Naxals in Chhattisgarh and Jharkhand. United Nations Security General Antonio Guterres said in his annual report on children in armed conflict, and we quote, "The United Nations continues to receive reports of recruitment and use of children by armed groups, including Maoists, in particular in Chhattisgarh and Jharkhand." One such young recruit was Rajveer, a resident of Jharkhand's Latehar district. He was just 8 years old when he was picked up by Naxalites. Forced to perform menial jobs, he says he was deprived of basic nutrition and was not given medical attention when he needed it. He was later rescued by security personnel. He was amongst the lucky ones.
I wasn't doing well there. We were tortured and asked to work the whole day. We were also made to cook food and do a lot of physical training. We did not get enough sleep at night. If we refused, the naxals threatened us. They said that they would amputate our limbs if we don't follow their orders.
Independent estimates indicate at least 2,500 children are associated with armed groups in Naxal-affected areas. The UN also expressed concern over the killing and maiming of children who continue to be recruited and used as human shields by Maoists in India, and over the threat of sexual violence against girls within Naxalite ranks. Villagers are terrorized by Naxal's oppressive and violent style of operation. Their modus operandi includes collecting illegal taxes from the poorest of the poor, those they claim to represent.
Naxals threaten us by saying that if we won't give our children up for training, they will take our land away from us.
While we were working in the fields, the Naxalites came and took our children away.
The Central Reserve Police Force, deployed to combat Naxals in Chhattisgarh, has taken up the noble responsibility of educating the children in the Naxal-affected villages by providing them free coaching.
नक्सली सिर्फ इसलिए अपहरण करते हैं क्योंकि वो नहीं चाहते कि आदिवासी बच्चा पढ़े.
Naxals kidnap your children because they don't want them to be educated.
क्योंकि वो नहीं चाहते कि हमारे आदिवासी बच्चा वो ज्ञान हासिल करे.
They don't want the children to gain knowledge or to become successful.
डॉक्टर बने, इंजीनियर बने, ये कभी नहीं चाहते क्योंकि
They don't want any child from these areas to become a doctor or an engineer.
बच्चा पढ़ लिख गया, कोई बड़ा शिक्षक बन गया.
Because if your child succeeds in any of these fields, he or she will contribute to this country's development. The Naxals don't want that. Hence, they kidnap the children so they can't study further.
Perhaps this is the right approach. Apart from showing muscle power, the government needs to win the minds and hearts of the villagers in these regions. It will be key to winning the battle against Naxalism.
Conditions have improved. People are now aware of the importance of education. If a child will study, he or she will help the village, the country and the society to grow.
This area across the river, access to the village is still an issue. The literacy rate remains very poor. Villagers are uneducated and do not understand the value of education. To improve conditions, we have joined hands with several other people and opened a school here.
With this latest attack, the Naxalites are taking center stage in Indian politics once again. Indian security forces have stepped up operations against ultra-left-wing guerrillas deep in the forests of Chhattisgarh. Can India eliminate the Naxal menace? And perhaps the most important question, can we avoid yet another lethal attack?